Nato has started its biggest military exercises in decades in Europe. Operation Steadfast Defender will take place across much of Europe and includes troops from Sweden, which isn't even a NATO member yet. Sweden is also working to increase resilience on the civilian side. Many people fear what a war with Russia might bring to the country. Teri Schultz visited a school in Stockholm to find out more.
Reading, writing, and arithmetic aren't the only things Swedish children are learning at school these days.
Så vi kommer åka lite tidigare.
And now, some news about where people can seek shelter in case of war.
Åsa Lind started using news programs in her curriculum 2 years ago to open conversations with students worried about the implications of Russia's war on Ukraine. She also shares recommendations from authorities on how to be prepared for any emergency, something the government calls total defense.
It's always been important to incorporate the kids' worries and their anxiety and try to teach them about the surroundings and what's happening in the world.
But last month, when several top-ranking officials emphasized publicly that Swedes must prepare for war, the warning that made bomb shelters a headline, Lind says she saw anxiety rise.
A lot of our young persons got worried, and a lot of the adults as well. And as a teacher, you have to keep your own worries to yourself and just try to be ordinary about it and follow the routines and create a safe space in school for the kids.
That seems to have worked for most of her students.
We have to know what to do if it's gonna be a war. I'm a little scared about that, but I don't feel like it's gonna be a war in Sweden.
It feels more safe when I get to know about this stuff.
But not every child in Sweden has this kind of institutional support to put the warnings of war into context. And with older teens, social media has fanned the fears.
There was one day when just all of social media was just, everything was just prepare for war. And so I got pretty scared.
Counselors on a helpline run by the Swedish children's rights organization BRIS saw a huge spike in calls after the government statements.
Where will I go if there will be a war? I can only be honest. I cannot promise a child there won't be any war, but I can talk about the general knowledge about the risk of Sweden being in war now is not higher than yesterday.
BRIS spokeswoman Maya Dahl says they got some powerful assistance in explaining the confusing situation to children. 24-hour preferential placement by TikTok.
Everyone in Sweden who opened the application that day would get a notification. Here we have questions and answers about what the armed forces mean with war. We have to prepare for war in Sweden. And then you have information on why they're saying this right now and what you need to know.
Dahl says the TikTok boost helped temporarily, but she still thinks the official statements were unnecessarily alarming. A spokesman for the armed forces disagrees.
I think this is a very good thing. The awareness has raised and people are more concerned about their own preparedness.
The Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency says the number of searches on its website for air raid shelters has gone up exponentially, as has the number of downloads of the booklet on how to be ready if war comes.
Now let's go to DW correspondent Teri Schultz in Brussels, who filed that report. Teri, does the Swedish government feel that it is facing a particular threat?
No, it doesn't, Gerhardt, and it says that's not why it came out with these seemingly coordinated statements reminding citizens that it wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility that conflict could be seen in Sweden at some time. In fact, they've been giving these warnings for years, and even that booklet that I showed in my story there at the end, that was first issued after World War II, and it was reprinted and sent out again in 2018, so that was even before the Russian war on Ukraine started. So Swedish officials say this is something that they want citizens to be prepared for in any case, and that it just happens that right now, when there are so many uncertainties in the world, that it was the right time for them to say it again, to remind people.
It sounded in your story there as if the children's rights advocates thought this situation should have been handled differently. Was that the impression you got?
That wasn't just the impression I got. They said that openly. And in fact, Breeze, the organization that I profiled there, even issued a press release to that effect. They felt like the government officials should have given them more warning so they could put more child-appropriate language on their website so that they could give parents more tools to discuss with children when they saw these headlines or saw these TikTok videos that said, prepare for war. So they felt like this should have been done in a better coordinated manner. But since then, they said, government officials and the armed forces have come to them and said they wanted to work together better to explain things to children now.
Now, Sweden is expecting to join NATO in the very near future, if it gets approval of Hungary, of course. Will this change anything about its perception of the threat?
It absolutely won't. Again, these are situations that the Swedish government says citizens should be prepared for in any case, in perhaps a weather catastrophe, a natural disaster of some kind. And in fact, I asked at NATO headquarters, the head of the military committee, whether he thought Sweden was exaggerating a bit the threat that he faced. And he said, on the contrary, I think every NATO ally should get prepared this way. All citizens should have radios that don't need electricity, should have food supplies, should have water supplies, and should know where to go in case of disaster. So, in fact, Sweden is being used as a role model for other countries.
DW's Teri Schultz there reporting from Brussels. Thank you very much, Teri.